What a moment! What does the arrival of 49 M1A1 Abrams tanks from Australia in mid-July 2025 actually mean? If reports say that the first units were easily destroyed on the battlefield by Russian forces, was the repeatedly delayed shipment in fact a warning sign that this legendary tank is not fully ready, is vulnerable, or even ill-suited to the realities of modern warfare? Or are there other, rarely discussed factors behind the failure of this armored platform on the front lines? Let's break down, step by step, what really happened. Let's dive deeper. The biting cold December winds sweeping across the grasslands of eastern Ukraine brought not only snow, but also a profound irony for Western military strategy. Amid reports of Kyiv's defensive lines pulling back, Australia finally delivered the last 12 units from its batch of M1A1 Abrams tanks. Western media may have portrayed this as a boost in strength, but in the eyes of Russian drone operators and artillery units, the arrival of these tanks was merely the next chapter in a major hunt. Ever since American tanks first rolled into Ukraine, the outcome has been clear. The once invincible legend of the Abrams has crumbled in the face of far cheaper yet deadly Russian precision technologies. The harsh reality for Kyiv's supporters is reflected in indisputable statistics. Of the 31 Abrams tanks initially supplied by the United States with great fanfare, around 27 have been reduced to charred wrecks or abandoned on the battlefield. That means roughly 87% of Ukraine's entire Abrams fleet has been destroyed in less than 2 years. Now, with the remaining tanks from Australia entering service, the central question is no longer whether they can change the situation, but how long they will survive before ending up in the sights of Russian thermal optics. After the first Australian M1A1 Abrams tank was lost in July, further destruction followed. The climax came recently, on December 22nd, which became a dark day for the remnants of Ukraine's armored forces. In a highly coordinated operation, the Russian military once again destroyed another M1A1 Abrams, proving yet again that this more than 60-ton massive steel is merely an easy target. However, the destruction of the Abrams was only the tip of the iceberg. Under the command of the Rubicon Center, an elite unit of Russian drone operators that has become a feared menace, a total of 115 strategic targets were neutralized in a short period of time. Ukraine's list of losses is staggering, ranging from German-made Leopard 1A5 tanks and 2 S-1 Gvozdika self-propelled artillery to various infantry firing positions buried in defensive trenches. Russia's success was not a coincidence, but the result of brilliant technological adaptation. In the Pokrovsk area, drone operators from the Rubicon Unit and the 76th Air Assault Division showed the world how the so-called crown jewel of NATO tanks can be forcibly stripped away. The way Russian FPV drones destroy Abrams tanks is a highly efficient symphony of death. Rather than attacking the front of the tank, which is protected by thick composite armor, Russian drone operators exploit a fundamental weakness in the Abrams design: its extremely thin top armor. Russian FPV drones, often costing only a few $100s, approach from a high angle, executing a top attack. Once an Abrams is detected by reconnaissance drones, an FPV drone carrying an anti-tank warhead dives at high speed toward the turret roof or the hot rear section of the engine. On the top, the tank's armor is usually only a few centimeters thick, in stark contrast to the front, which is equivalent to hundreds of millimeters of armor. An explosion from above penetrates directly into the crew compartment or ignites the ammunition, causing a jack-in-the-box effect in which the turret is blown off by an internal explosion. This effectiveness proves that the era in which giant tanks dominated the battlefield absolutely has come to an end. Under Russian control of the skies, there is nowhere to hide. Ukrainian crews themselves have begun to complain about these conditions, referring to the Abrams as a drone magnet. Its massive size and large logistical footprint make it extremely difficult to conceal. The Honeywell AGT 1500 gas turbine engine it uses is powerful, but it emits an enormous amount of heat through its rear exhaust. When viewed through the infrared cameras of Russian drones, an operating Abrams appears like a bright beacon in the darkness, making it easy for Russian operators to lock onto the target even from kilometers away. The detection scenario is simple yet deadly. Once the engine is started, its heat signature is immediately picked up by Russian aerial surveillance systems, and within minutes, the coordinates are already in the hands of artillery units or FPV drone operators. Australia may feel proud to be sending these upgraded M1A1 situational awareness tanks, but they forget that these tanks are old assets, already 20 years old, and were retired without ever once experiencing real combat. Although they are claimed to have better imaging and communication packages than the standard US version, there is one fatal shortcoming. Washington forbids the export of the depleted uranium armor layer that forms the core of the Abrams protection. As a result, these Australian tanks are sent into battle naked in the face of Russian anti-tank missiles. Ukraine's attempts to compensate for this weakness appear highly desperate. They have installed cages or steel mesh over the turret, attached additional reactive armor plates, fitted rubber skirts on the tracks, and even hung chains designed to detonate warheads before they strike the tank's hull. These emergency modifications add roughly 2 to 3 tons to the tank's chassis, ultimately reducing its mobility, despite mobility being the only way for a tank to try to evade drone attacks. For Russia, however, these modifications are merely decorative and incapable of stopping the shaped charged jets of modern Russian anti-tank missiles. Ukraine's recent tactical changes are proof of an implicit admission of Russia's military superiority. Abrams tanks are no longer used as the spearhead of frontline assaults. Due to mounting losses, these tanks now operate only under the cover of night, attempting to hide behind electronic jamming, while infantry must work even harder to clear the skies of Russian drones before the tanks dare to move. The Abrams has now been downgraded to little more than a mobile bunker or long-range artillery platform, a deeply humiliating role for a tank designed for high-speed NATO-style maneuver warfare. The failure of the Abrams in Ukraine is the failure of NATO combined arms doctrine itself. Western doctrine assumes that tanks will always operate with full air support and artillery superiority. In the face of the Russian military, Ukraine has neither. Without air cover, a 60-ton tank is nothing more than an expensive pile of steel waiting to be destroyed. Russia has created a battlefield environment where drone technology and anti-tank missiles reign supreme, rendering every dollar the West has invested in these aging tanks effectively wasted. Will the final 12 tanks from Australia be enough? The answer is clearly no. Amid the personnel and equipment crisis afflicting the Ukrainian armed forces, this small addition will not halt Russia's advance. The battle history of Avdiivka and Kursk Oblast has already proven that the bravery of Ukrainian tank crews or the sophistication of Western optics is powerless against Russia's systematic war of attrition tactics. The era in which heavy tanks could roam freely across the battlefield is over. So what sustainable innovation could keep the Abrams relevant after 2025, AI-based autonomy or active protection systems? And Russia will not allow that to work either. That's all for today, and thanks for watching.